thank you for your testimony. Bet you don't know what I'm going to ask. As you know, more than 50 communities across the country, including 14 in my home state of North Dakota, have a so-called basement exemption. And I just want to make this point because I think for a lot of folks, they wonder why that is. But a basement in a state like North Dakota and in a state that is plagued with tornadoes and bad weather can be a significant mitigation factor itself. And so I think there's good public policy to encourage the availability. And as we all know, those of us who have dealt with flood work in the past, you don't replace a finished basement if the basement is destroyed. You look at things that traditionally would be down there like freezers and furnaces and maybe an electrical panel. And so a basement exemption is not, you know, recovering from a flooded basement is not full recovery. It's simply limited to those things that you would expect would be in a basement. As part of this exemption, the city of Fargo, which has experienced its share of floods, has developed and adopted pretty rigorous flood proofing construction requirements that meet or exceed the technical manuals. For example, the city requires that all residential structures be flood-proofed if they're located in the special flood hazard area or within 50 feet of it. The top of the basement walls must be elevated 2.5 feet above the base flood elevation, and fill adjacent to the structure must be 2 feet above the base flood elevation. Additionally, the foundations are subject to annual inspections. For new developments in the special flood hazardous area, the properties must be elevated with fill to at least the base flood elevation. You know, overall, the flood proofing requirements have been a very effective flood mitigation tool in the region, in spite of some pretty heavy water pressures, not just floods, but obviously high groundwater tables. More than the 600 flood-proofed foundations installed over the past 40 years, none have failed. But it's a great concern that I'm going to raise with you, which is the elimination of the basement exemption. What we are hearing from the officials in the city of Fargo is that that exemption, elimination of that exemption, could result in a $10,000 a year increase for very modest homes that are middle-class homes, and we've been discussing, I think, quite accurately the affordability issues. And so I have two questions. Do you have an estimate on what those premiums would be in communities if the basement exemption is eliminated? And will you be maintaining this exemption? Have you made any decisions? I know that Senator Hoeven and I have been on this since I first got here, and we're curious about what your thinking is.
As far as the cost, I would have to go back and ask the question of staff. Does base flood elevation start at the base floor, or would it be the basement? Because if a basement's 8 foot below and that's where they look at, you would see those numbers. But I don't know how you calculate, and I'd have to ask staff, do we calculate at the floor level at grade, or do we calculate from the basement? So I wouldn't know that, but we can get that for the record. As far as the second part, I don't know that either. I'll have to ask staff, because we saw so much of the language that allowed us to do exemptions exempted out that most of the affordability pieces, which this may be how it was looked at, were being exempted. I'd have to ask staff, is that what that is, or is that still able to stand on its own? But because the way that Bigger Waters are written, there were so many exemptions previously for affordability grandfathering that were taken out, that I don't know if we even have that flexibility, but we'll get back to you on that, Senator.
That would be terrific, and if I can just indulge just one follow-up. I think it's important that, you know, as people think about it, maybe in areas where there aren't tornadoes, in areas where they don't need the basement for additional protection, that it's not just about affordability. It's about making sure that my people are safe when bad weather comes. And so I really encourage you to take a look at this, understand what that means, not only for a state like mine, but a state like Missouri, a number of states that are very dependent on basement as an opportunity for shelter.
I understand, Senator. We'll get back to you on those 2 points.
Thank you very much.